Okay, so hi, I'm back. This is Singh-McCollum, St. John the Divine in Victoria, BC. I happen to be at home and I seem to have purloined my beautiful partner's study for the duration of a short video. And I do want it to be short because these are meant to be little snippets and introductions to theological thinking. So there's been a big gap between my initial, hello, this is some Jesus stuff, and yesterday's thinking about looking at the life of Jesus, because we so often in the church skip through to the death and get obsessed about what happened on the cross. And I grew up in a tradition which kind of went into gory detail about how Jesus had to die and all the pain he had to suffer because of our individual wickedness. And I think there's more to it than that. That's only one way of looking at what happened to the cross. And it's not to deny the brutality and the viciousness of what happened to Jesus, but to think about the theology of what that means within the church, because that informs how we act and how we are as Christians. There have been many theories through the centuries, many ways of expressing the meaning behind the death of Jesus. Beginning way back in the 3rd century is one of the first theories that we know of that Origen put together. The ransom theory, still I think held mainly by the Roman Catholic Church. The ransom theory basically says that the devil kind of demanded a fee for the sin that was in the world, and that fee was paid by Jesus, and who ransomed humanity back from their thrall to sin. And that's still often an often held viewpoint. It's one aspect of looking at the death of Jesus, and it continues on to the bait and switch that God said, yes, I will give you my only son, but the power and the love of God brought Jesus back to life again. So Satan was denied the possibility of keeping the Son of God for all of eternity. And then there's been a satisfaction theory that came probably around the 11th century. The ransom theory was predominant for many years. The satisfaction theory is more of Anselmian thought, and what that means is that sin was such a scar upon the world that God demanded satisfaction for the wrongdoings of humankind. And in doing that, in dying on the cross, Jesus paid the price and satisfied God's wrath against humanity. Still a very popular way of thinking in many churches. And many questions have to be asked about that. How can God only be satisfied by some kind of sacrifice? And at that, a blood sacrifice, particularly as we see in the Hebrew scriptures, God saying, I despise your sacrifices. What is it that says somehow that a bloodthirsty God needs that kind of restitution? So that to me is open to question. Then there's a kind of moral example that Jesus was such a giving human being that Jesus set for us an example that even being willing to go to death for the sake of God's love for humanity. And that was Abelard thought somewhere around the 12th century of the Common Era. And that, for many people, resonates more, that Jesus, in giving his life, is showing us the example of how we are to be with one another. Then there's a kind of arbitrary choice of God way of thinking, that this God salvation just is a kind of arbitrary thing. It's called the acceptance theory. It's a Dun Scotia thought from about the 14th century of the Common Era. And the one that really has settled, I think, in so many minds and in so many traditions within the church, and I find it in my own Church of England liturgies again and again coming back, is that idea of penal substitution, that sin deserves some kind of punishment. Sin must be punished, that God is unable to abide sin. And so Jesus pays the penalty for that. And again, it's gone hand in hand, particularly with the post-Reformation mentality that um, it's all individualistic. It's all about me and God, and I deserve to be punished. And Jesus jumped in and took the bullet. And that's a very hard way of looking at, again, at God. The God who we are told again and again in scriptures is loving and gentle, like a mother, like a father. So the idea that God demands a punishment is one that has informed the church, I think, in a very dangerous and difficult way. But it's certainly the most dominant form that you'll find, particularly within conservative theologies today. And in the last 50 or so years, there have been a number of other narratives used to describe what happens on the cross. Christus Victor, that Christ has shown the victory over death. There's also a version called the Christus Victor narrative version. There's a non-violent Jesus being the non-violent resistor to violence, and a whole load of other ways of looking at the death of Jesus. And it is important because it's an important part of the Christian tradition. And many of us would probably take bits from all of this in the typical kind of postmodern way of looking at things as a buffet rather than as an entree. There are bits of all of these teachings that show us something of the nature of God and God's love and God's giving of oneself to us. But when we bind it all up with violence, when we bind it all up with the God who demands things from us because of the misdeeds of previous eras, we get into kind of quite dangerous territory, I think. We have to work out these things. I've given a little reflection on some of them, but we have to work out for all of us what we believe that meaning is. And for me, the meaning comes strongly in that this is what happens when you resist powers of empire, powers of destruction. Even to resist them with love and with grace means, and it puts us in danger of being nailed to a cross, literally or figuratively. And that leads on to, it's not the end of the story. Whatever we believe is the meaning behind Christ's death on the cross, it's not the end of the story. There is more to come. And as I've taken nearly 8 minutes, I think the more to come, and thinking briefly about resurrection and ascension, as was pointed out to me by Sarah Lee MacDonald yesterday, the one I didn't mention earlier, I think all of that is tied up, and all of this is the mythology. And by mythology, I'm not dismissing it. I'm saying this is a formative story, something that we really have to grapple with in our ongoing thinking about and living through faith. God bless you all in your seeking and in your finding, and I will return.